And we're back. Hello again, darling.
Hello.
So hello to everyone who's watching. Welcome from me and also welcome from Ken.
Hello.
And today we are continuing our journey through the Healing Light Tarot with the Suit of Wands. So we're just going to start with the Ace and we will go through to number 7 in this one, won't we? And then we'll do 8 through to the King in the next video. So yeah. So Ace of Wands, darling.
Yes.
Give me your thoughts on it.
Well, to be honest, the wand suit is one that I like in a general sense, and I think because as we've mentioned in previous videos about your aces, you know, the lack of that hand makes it so that it's almost, you know, you're the one that has to reach for this thing. And I mean, you encapsulate the sort of directional aspect of the will and the fire from the colors, but you've also got it from both ends of the wand, and then you've got little sort of almost chakra-esque
intersections
along the wand itself. And I think there's, you know, it encapsulates everything that the wand is meant to. It has that, you know, if you were holding that, you know, you're directing your will in that one.
Yeah. If you think it's phallic, it's because it is.
I wasn't going to say.
Well, you would, so I thought I might as well just say it before anyone else does. I really do associate the Ace of Wands with phallic energy, and it was based. I was sort of inspired very directly by the Robin Wood card, because I mean, I love this depiction. I mean, she shows, you know, a magic, literal magic wand surrounded by fire, but also with the sunflowers, and it is very, very phallic. You know, yeah. I do, you know, this for me, there was the reason I wanted to do that. I mean, actually, it's something we mentioned last time as well over the sort of dual inspirations here, because, you know, I was talking about the Ace of Swords being inspired by Norbert Losch's Cosmic Tarot, but you can see the theme again. See, this is the Ace of Swords from the Cosmic that we were talking about last time. And I loved the fact that the sword was floating within a mandala, and that inspired the sort of mandala continuums on all 4 of my aces. But with this, I think, I mean, I've always associated the Ace of Wands with phallic energy, but in a wider sense, you know, I associate the whole suit with creative energy, what I call libido energy. I mean, I think it's a word that's used very often in a sexual energy connotation, but I think it has a wider context as well, in that, you know, it encompasses the creative, the procreative, and not just in a human sexuality sense, but also that wider principle. So hence, you know, my desire to sort of make the wand, the Shiva lingam, you know, overtly phallic. But yeah, it's like you say, I kind of saw it in my mind's eye as a glass wand, you know, emanating from the base chakra point, going up to the head chakra point. But I like the idea of this sort of solid, transparent glass crystal, and then you can see the sort of flaring intersections of the mandalas shining through it.
So, it's interesting you mentioned, like you say, you envisaged it as a glass wand, which, you know, like the connotations of it being obviously quite a proactive and you know, passionate, channeled energy card, and yet glass could be, you know, can be seen as being quite fragile, and yet it's fragile,
but it's also a conduit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's something that can the energy can move cleanly through.
Yeah. And it's something that I've always fascinated me, because it was a motive that turned up in one of my previous decks, the Sun Tarot, on the 9 of Wands. Because when I was kind of envisaging that, you know, I saw the wounded warrior clinging within a firestorm to these, you know, these pillar-like wands, sort of, you know, you can't see that they're embedded in the ground, but they're obviously sort of anchor points. But in my mind's eye, I kind of saw those as deep blood red, but very transparent, toughened glass. And it's something that's always fascinated me, that glass can be brittle, but it can also be you know, it can also be toughened to incredible strength, and yet it is this transparent conduit. So it's kind of something that fascinates me. And again, it wasn't so much a conscious thing with this, but when I came to sort of design it, that's just the way it turned out intuitively. I wanted it to be transparent. I wanted it to be glowing. So it's actually one of my favorite cards from the deck. It's because every now and again, as a deck creator, you do something, you think, oh yeah, I've kind of achieved what I set out to achieve, and a little bit more. And this was one of those, and it didn't take me long to do. It wasn't a sort of, you know, it wasn't a really sort of drawn out complex design. I think I created this image within the space of a couple of hours. So yeah, it is a real personal favorite. But for me, again, as a card, it's a personal favorite because it really speaks of potential really waiting to explode and to well up. And I love that kind of joyous but slightly dangerous creative and procreative potential. It's the potential of the artist. You know, that's for me why it's such a powerful card.
And with your placement of the mandalas in this one, what was your thought process behind where the intersections would go? And
now I'm glad you've asked that, because this one is slightly different from the others, because the other three aces, the sort of mandala continuum is central to the card if you look, but with this one I wanted the center of the mandala continuum to be the base chakra. So that is actually the center of the image, and you can see, you know, you can see how the mandalas then just spread out. So I mean, for me, this is the root of all libido energy. So that is where that sort of healing intersection is, you know. It's the wand is with the others, I suppose, with the Ace of Pentacles, swords and cups, you know, that's very much in the center of the mandala. This is as well, but in a different way. You know, you're kind of, it's almost as if you're, you know, you could be looking down and seeing the wand sort of rise up out of that center. But also as well, you know, the glowing spheres, you know, which again have very sort of testicular sort of connotations, like the sunflowers do in the Robin Wood. They are sort of emerging. That is similarly, they're you know, in a funny sort of way, they're central to the continuum as well, because, you know, you can see those inner circles revolving around those. So everything is connected, you know. So I love this card. I love the Ace of Wands as a card, and it was just a joy this was a joy to design. So yeah. Cool. Should we go on to 2?
We shall.
Fantastic.
Now, interestingly, my experiences with the 2, as I mentioned in the first swords video about the 2 of Swords being a nemesis card, and yet I kind of see aspects of that again reflected in this particular card, because you know, it's, although you've not got the, you know, those swords obscuring your view, sometimes I feel as though this one, it's almost as though you can be being pulled in either, you know, feel as though you're being pulled in opposite directions, but also at the same time trying to stay central and keep them from going any further out. It's I often sort of look at it as a way of trying to bring together and synergize, you know, either conflicting or disparate energies that you know, they're affecting the, you know, implementation of your will or plan or whatever. And I did find that this one as well, especially with the, again, you've got the repetition of the mandala effect in there, centralized with obviously the you know, the star crown chakra sort of almost on fire. But again, it kind of doesn't detract from, the notion of, you know, of you being in control. It's all about how you temper that will.
I love the Golden Dawn description of this card as the Lord of Dominion. And it's funny because, again, I love Pamela Coleman Smith's depiction, but I thought I want to do something slightly different. You know, in her card, you know, the guy is between the 2 wands. He's holding the world in his hand. I like the idea of him, this guy standing on top of the world. You know, thinking about the term Dominion, I thought, yeah, but also these wands are his support. They're they're incredibly rooted, and he's standing in balance, within that gateway. But then they are something that you pointed out. They are an opposition, and it's a little detail that I picked up on from the Waite-Smith card that I wanted to add in here, because you see on the wall of the castle turret in the Waite-Smith card, there's a little shield with crossed roses and lilies on them, and I've always seen that as a depictions of opposites. aka the lily is denoting purity, whereas the rose is denoting passion. And I love that concept of passion and purity balanced against each other, but he is perfectly balanced between the two. You've got a lily, at the base of this wand, a rose at the base of the other, and to me that shows that his energies are perfectly balanced, which means that he's in balance, he's in control. And it's a great potential card, because when you're in that place of stability, you can grow, you can progress, you can create, you can achieve. So to me, this is kind of Dominion in the best possible sense. But yeah, he's right in the center of the mandala, but that crowning chakra is lit up. And I think, again, sort of following on from the ace, you see the energy, emerging from the base chakra and flowing right up to the crown chakra, but you can see that energized here. And it is like a crown. It's like a sort of crowning glory. So it's the sentiment is the same as the Waite-Smith card. I just kind of wanted to depict it in a more original way.
And I think I think that it's the original depictions, when they people are learning necessarily things, they don't necessarily understand what it's trying to say, because it's either too symbolic or it's too literal, and then they don't see how they can apply it to their circumstance. And I think with this one, it marks out all of the positive things we want to achieve, but at the same time, there's this notion that, again, that these cards are not a static snapshot, that they are a living image. And so, like, if he just remains there and chooses to do nothing, that world is going to rotate. His arms are going to get tired. Things will move on without him, and then he will become less sure and less stable and less able to carry things out. And I like the subtlety of those warnings that a lot of your cards carry, because sometimes it's easy just to go, oh yeah, he's got the world in his hand, he's ready to go, but it's like, actually, no, there are pitfalls to watch out for.
You've just highlighted the story of the tarot as a whole, haven't you? Because we with any of the tarot archetypes, there's no way that we could stay permanently in any one of those states. They're all about progression. But I think you're right, it really does show here at the beginning of the wand suit. I mean, it's moving on to the 3. I even, on my deck, but also very much on the Waite-Smith deck, I firmly believe that it's the same man. I mean, he's now grounded between 3 wands, and again, I mean, what I've done here is very similar to the Waite-Smith. I mean, you see on the Waite-Smith, he's on the top of a cliff, he's watching the ship sail away. Similar here. I mean, I wanted to kind of give a sense of, somebody standing on the quay of a harbour, watching the ship sail out. I mean, the Golden Dawn call this the card of established strength. And I think in a way, it's the potential of the two put to practical use, isn't it? You see possibly a merchant, who has sent the ship off to sea filled with cargo, or the ship has gone out empty and is going to come back full, whichever. But there is a sense of a journey and, a finished result. So again, this is a sort of, I mean, with this one, I've done something, I've got the ship sailing through a mandala portal as it leaves harbour, but it's the journey that counts in this card for me, and also it's very much the guy in the foreground who has set the wheels in motion for this. So I've always seen it as a waiting card. It's a work in progress card, whereas the ace is raw energy. The 2 is the potential of raw energy when it's harnessed. This is kind of put into practice. You know, we kind of see the journey beginning, but we don't know what the outcome is yet. And it's when I first came to tarot, this was actually one of the cards that I found the most difficult, because I kind of just didn't get what he was doing, stood on the edge of the cliff, you know, looking down at the bay. But once I got it, I thought, oh yeah, you know. And then you begin to realize we all have so many instances like this in our life. I mean, at any one point of our lives, you know, we will be in process. We will have set the wheels in motion for something. We're waiting for that outcome. And it's a card that requires patience. You know, you've thrown all your creative energy out there. You've just not seen any results yet.
No. And I think, you know, that's an easy thing for people to do, is that, you know, they want instant results.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, the best will in the world, life doesn't work that way, you know. And I think, you know, like I'm firmly in agreement that, you know, the figure in the 2 is the same figure as the one in the 3. There is that continuation.
It's, again, I've grown to love this card, because I've realized as well it can work on so many different levels, but also so many different scales. This can represent a short-term process, but it can also represent a long-term process, a process that spans a lifetime, you know. But it can also represent the blink of an eye. You know, we make decisions on a daily basis. We throw things out there. Sometimes they can be thrown back at us straight away. You know, this can be something as simple as a remark made in a conversation, you know, but then again, it can also be the fruits of years of planning, knowing that you're not going to see any results for, you know, for many years to come.
Yeah.
It's quite potent, isn't it? There's a lot more in here than I ever realized when I first came to the tarot.
And I think you just touched then on, you know, again, when we think about these as living images, you know, he's, you know, if he has sent that boat out to deliver or to collect or whatever, you know, the thing that he's waiting for, he's not going to wait there forever, is he? You know, he's not going to just stand there holding onto his torch, waiting for it to come back over the horizon, because that, let's say, that instant gratification doesn't exist. You know, even in today's modern world with, you know, speedy ships and planes and all that, it doesn't work that way.
You know?
I
mean, it's the sort of thing, isn't it? Once the ship has gone over the horizon, or even before that, you turn around and you get on with your everyday life.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that you've kind of just highlighted for me one of the most potent things about this card. It's one of those admonitions, just, okay, you've sent your ships out, you know, park that and just go and get on with everything else, wait for it to come back.
Yeah.
So, yeah. A lot in that one, more than I ever realized. But let's have a look at the 4.
Here we go. The 4.
So I think this is what this was always one that I found much easier to deal with. You know, the card of completion.
Yeah, it does have quite a clear cut sort of representation across so many different decks that, you know, there's not a huge amount of deviation to, you know, to what it's trying to depict or symbolize, because it kind of, like you say, it's quite succinct, and it kind of hits the nail on the head really quickly.
I think with my version, I mean, the Waite Smith shows 4 wands in this arrangement with, you know, a garland of fruit and flowers across the top. I think it's more explicit in the Robin Wood, because I think her card shows an actual wedding canopy. But I like the symbolism of weddings and celebrations, because, I mean, as a card of completion, this is still only number 4 in the sequence. So to me, this talks about, you know, if you're thinking in terms of the context of the 3, the ship's come back and it's been, you know, it's richly loaded with cargo, and hence the celebration here. But this is not the culmination of everything. This is just, to me, I always see this as the completion of the first phase. And then it just opens the gates for you to move on to the next phase. And I think wedding symbolism is great, like, you know, is a great thing for this card, because that's precisely what a wedding is. You know, it's the beginning of the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's by no means an end in itself because it ushers in a whole new phase.
Yeah.
I kind of went a bit more overt with mine. The Waitsmith shows a celebration. I really wanted to show a party. We've got fireworks. We've
Bit
got
of a rave up going on.
we've got acid house music. We've got the works.
Yeah.
But it's to me, it's actually just a happy card.
Mm.
I think if you did that to it, if you were using reversals, I think it would, for me, it would still mean the same. It would still denote completion on some levels, but maybe it would be a bit more bittersweet, or maybe you could look at it as, completion that's been stalled or interrupted, or maybe, obstacles in the way. But
Yeah.
it's, for me, generally, it's a happy card because it's the kind of completion that you can move on from and progress, and grow through in a positive sense. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think that that's the point, isn't it? It's not not every card necessarily has to have a negative and a positive. There are
no,
some that are more can be seen as more overtly negative, and some that should be seen as more overtly positive.
yeah,
Because without that balance, your readings always end up being doom and gloom.
that's right. There you go. There's the Robin Wood.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it shows a couple under what I think is a wedding canopy.
And then we go from a joyous party to a
Oh yeah,
chaotic party.
yes, yeah. Now I base this. I was directly inspired. I own a deck that I really love called the Sheridan Douglas Tarot. It was a 1972 deck,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really inspired by the image and the iconography on the Sheridan Douglas because it showed two men fighting under, 5 wands interlocked as a pentagram, and they're just wrestling. It's not a fight to the death. And I kind of wanted to show a similar thing, but I mean, you've got sort of martial arts kind of fight going on here. The wands are kind of locked together, and you can see that they're crackling with energy where they overlap. Golden Dawn word for this, the card of strife. And yeah, how do I see this? I see this as the kind of struggles in life that we we gain strength through. These are kind of the necessary struggles that we have to go through. I suppose when you think of childbirth involves necessary pain, but when you look at what comes from that, and I think we all have processes like that in our life where we go through incredibly difficult times, but we're almost like refined in the fire. But then also there are times as well where, I mean, kids learn from play fighting. There's all sorts of skills being learned through that kind of play combat when we're kids, and that to me is what this denotes. It's not always a pleasant process, and in this case very much so. But again, each of my fighters has his own sphere, and it's where the spheres interlock is in the struggle, and ironically it's the struggle which is the healing and growing process. So all of those instances for me where it really doesn't feel nice, but ultimately you come out of it on the right side and you're stronger for the experience. How does that resonate with you? How did you see it?
I mean, the Rider Waite style one, obviously with the 5 figures with the 5 ones, and it looks like a chaotic sort of scrum of conflicting people, or people that can't agree. Whereas with your card, you've kind of taken it a bit in a different direction, like you say, for this notion of testing boundaries and figuring things out through pain and experience. And there was something about your card with the way that obviously you've got the wands interlocked as a pentagram, but it's also it's not it's not a balanced one. It's kind of skewed off to one side when you don't see where the other ones have actually gone, and then the other two are kind of almost intersected on his foot, which is nearly connected with the other guy's head. And there is a thing about your depiction of this that kind of made me think ever so slightly of the traditional devil card, because obviously often the devil card has like the demon and an inverted pentagram, and there was just something about that kind of stood out to me that was like maybe not to the extent of the major devil card, but there's an element of that, especially with this fiery, nature of will and passion and things like that.
And I mean, to me, the pentagram is an extremely powerful symbol. I think one that's very often misunderstood because of societal prejudice and its associations. The inverted pentagram was kind of co-opted to a certain extent, and there's such a kind of tangled web of thought and prejudice around it, particularly, from the sort of Christian elements of our society. But, the pentagram in its simplest form is, it's a map of the human body, isn't it? Amongst other things, head, hands outstretched, and feet. It's almost, to me, I see it as a map of human energy. And, in this instance, it felt really apt because, you've got this clash of human energy reflected in the clash of the wands forming the pentagram. And are they attracting? Are they repelling? Wherever they touch, they crackle. But yeah, it just kind of felt right. And I've used this symbology I used it on the quantum tarot as well. I can't remember which sort of which aspect of quantum physics Kay Stopforth actually drew parallel with the Five of Wands, but I used that same pentagrammic clashing because it's always just felt right for me for this card. And I think it does go back to my first experiences of the Sheridan Douglas tarot. It's a deck that I've always kind of resonated with. And I remember when I first saw the Five of Wands from that deck, I thought, oh yeah, it was saying very much the same thing as the Waite Smith, but I just thought, that's a really interesting way of saying it. So thanks to Alfred Douglas there, because I'm not really being original here. I'm kind of paying tribute to him. So yeah, but funnily enough, this can be a bit of a struggle of a card, but it's not one that I dislike. When it turns up in a reading for me, I kind of think, oh, okay, difficult times ahead, but at least I'm going to gain from it,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And actually moving on to the 6, again, I kind of paid tribute to the Sheridan Douglas deck because, again, I've kind of cribbed his symbolism rather than the Waite Smith, because I love that the more emblematic approach that he took.
You kind of bridge the gap between the depictive cards and a pip card with this one. But I think it lends something to it, the fact that you've got rid of those distracting elements of the procession, the guy on the horse, the things that people can't necessarily relate to in a modern context, and yet you've just stuck with the wands, the fire, the sort of the energy, and then this laurel wreath, and it kind of sums it up without having to necessarily have all those extra bits.
One of the things I loved about this card I loved the way the laurel wreath echoes the shape of the mandala.
Yeah.
And for me, the healing is in the victory. You've fought, you've pushed through, you've toiled, and then you get to the 6, the victory card, and you're kind of seeing the fruits of your labor. Again, it's only just past the halfway point of the sequence, so this is not a culmination. You move on to other things, but it's a sweet moment. And whether it's in terms of creativity, I think this is victory more in terms of creative and work achievements. This is not sort of victory in battle in the way that you'd see say with the Knight of Swords. This very much talks about achievements. And it's a lovely card. It just has so much joy attached to it for me. So,
and it's just, I think, again, the simplicity and the symmetrical nature of it. There's, just the fact that it's quite pleasing to the eye anyway. It instills that sense of positivity in you, even if you don't really know what the meaning is. And if you go back and compare it to the 5, there's something about that 5 that says, actually, it's not all smooth sailing at that point, but you go on to the 6 and it's completely changed. That those disjointed ones, that are a bit skew of that have all come
Mm.
into alignment, and there's this sense of accomplishment and achievement and pride, but not in a negative way. Sometimes it's okay to pat yourself on the back and and admit that you've achieved something. And in modern day, we're all so easily self-deprecating and just shrug off compliments, where actually especially when this card shows up in a reading, it's actually telling you, no, actually you deserve to say, I've done
You did
this.
good. Yeah, you did good. And again, I mean, I kind of, I took the basic symbolism on the Sheridan Douglas, but I've added to it in that, I love the idea of all the fire energy crackling at both ends of the wands, and I think the laurel wreath it's kind of a universal symbol, isn't it? Most people would recognize that as a victory symbol. But then I also love with the Sheridan Douglas, and why I kind of emulated it. I love the fact that it just brings something of the sort of symmetry that you see in a Marseille deck into a pictorial form. This was one of the very early cards. I think this was actually one of about the first 4 or 5 cards I designed for this deck. This and the 8 of Wands were among that first batch. So yeah, one more to go on this video.
Yes. We are on to the 7.
On to the 7, yeah, because six for me is always a number of perfection, and it's an even number, so it's balanced. So you've got that victory energy, but then you get to the 7 and it kind of throws a cat in among the pigeons, doesn't it?
Yeah. And with this one, I sometimes see this figure in almost like a blacksmithy kind of way, because it's almost as though he's he's going to strike an anvil with the wand to achieve, to get his point across as well. Apart from obviously the deflective, protective, defensive things that the traditional ones can sometimes represent. That was one of the things that really struck me, was the fact that despite all of that, you're still free to create, because you are the one that's at the top. And again, he's in that mandala, and that's where the achievement or the action is going to come from, regardless of those 6 that are sort of poking up at you, kind of thing.
I mean, if we go back to the actual 6 of Wands itself, I mean, it's it's an even number. It's a victory card. It's 6 represents perfection. You get to the 7, things get unbalanced. But the Golden Dawn viewed this as the Valor card. It was the Lord of Valor, and I've always seen this. I mean, one of the reasons just he's right in the center of the mandala there is, this is a card for me that when I pull it, I just I look at it and say, okay, you're outnumbered. You might feel out of your depth. Particularly. There's times when I've been in work or creative situations and you think, I'm blagging this because I really don't feel capable of achieving it, but I'm just, I'll pretend until it becomes real, sort of thing. But I think the message of this is, it's like, you may feel out of your depth, but you've got this.
Yeah.
Just be brave and you've got it. You can, you can handle all of these just with one sweep of that wand. And it's I think there's a lot of faith involved in this card, and very often when you're kind of meditating on this card and you've got to see your own experience in it, it does call on a lot of faith, particularly when we kind of look at the areas in our own lives where we do feel a bit out of our depth, or how on earth am I going to get through this situation? And again, when I came to the tarot, I found this a very threatening card. But now, to me, it's a really encouraging one, because I kind of used to focus on these at the bottom, but for me now, this is where the emphasis is.
Yeah, and I think that's the pitfall a lot of people fall into, is they focus on, being outnumbered and all the, they're coming up for me with their torches and their pitchforks, etc. That kind of mentality. When actually, like you say, you have shifted the focus to the important bit of this, which is, if you take it as a card of valor or a card of bravery or whatever, the achievement is there in yourself and that you can do it. And actually, interestingly, when you just said about the card of valor, it just made me look back at the 6 into the 7. And if you take it from, you've got the 6 ones at the bottom and him at the top. he might, I'd say, he might not necessarily be defending himself. They may be
No.
celebrating, and he's actually, pumping the air with his wand of
Ah,
achievement.
no,
So
that
again,
is a
you
good
can
perspective.
look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, interesting, because I hadn't really thought of it like that, but that is very, very valid.
Yeah.
We assume that there's hostility down there, is there?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Well,
and again, sometimes we see hostility where actually there isn't any.
Yeah.
And again, this all kind of falls back on this whole thing of putting ourselves down and, rejecting compliments and stuff. And so even when we, in this circumstances of the 7, people might be trying to be positive, but we might be thinking, no, they don't mean it. They're not being genuine, and actually they might be,
Yes.
again, depending on where other cards in a reading might fall would then help illustrate necessarily how you would interpret it.
Yeah, very much so. We're halfway.
We're on a roll.
We're on a roll. So on the next one, as we said, we're going to cover the second half of the suit of wands, going from number 8 right through to the king, aren't we?
Yep.
Fantastic. So for everyone who's watched, thanks for being with us, and you will see us next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.